Hey sis.
Who me?
Yes, you. Hola, welcome back to the Hey Sis, Yes You podcast. I am your host, Jalyssa, and today I'm so excited. I have my OG IG bestie on the podcast. Everybody, welcome Jena to the pod. Good morning, sis. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited. If you can't tell, I feel like this is a long time coming,
I
us to just be
know.
able to sit and chat. Would you introduce yourself to the podcast?
Yeah, so my name is Gina Holliday. I am an artist, an illustrator, and also an author. I run a brand that I've run about for about 9 years called Spoonful of Faith. And it's a mix of a design studio, but then we also create products where we put inspiring, encouraging messages on them, as well as vast diversity of women. And that's like one of the big parts of our brand is just sharing different women, different experiences, different lives. And we do all of that through Spoonful of Faith. So I'm a creative at heart. I've just always loved
Yes.
to create. And so that is a little bit about me. We are based in Minnesota, and I am a mommy and a wife. I have been married for about 10 years this year, and
Oh,
we have two children. A daughter named Layla, who's 10, and then my son AJ, who is 8. So
oh,
very fun family. The kids are in a good age right now. They're getting a
yeah.
little bit more independent, but still needing mama. So it's a good time. And so yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Aw, I love it. Thank you for introducing yourself. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see I'm wearing some of Gina's goods here. Okay.
Yes.
One of my favorite tops because it is like this is womanhood. I love the
Yes.
diversity. Like you said in your products, I just love the diversity of women that are represented. I have this one sweater from you that I wear all the time, and my boys swear it's me on the sweater with the big curly hair.
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
love that sweater. Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so I met you on Instagram. We both had two kids. Our
Yeah.
two
Oh my
oldest were
gosh.
the same age as they are still,
Yes.
10 and 8. And
Yep.
I mean, I just kept going, for some strange
Yeah, you
reason.
did. You did. You left me there. You kept going.
I left you at the two. And I remember when I met you on Instagram, I didn't know that people use Instagram to follow strangers. And I saw your page and I started following you. I think I read something from you, something that you had wrote. I started following you, I DM'd you, and we've been friends ever since. And I always say you're the first stranger that I met on Instagram. And it has just opened me up to a world of, I mean, many things following you. You are so incredibly inspiring
Thank
in many
you.
ways as a mom, as a wife, as an entrepreneur. I send your page and your products to almost everyone I know, like every
Oh,
woman. Because I think one thing I love about you that I'm super excited to get into is just like your consistency. Like you are creating beautiful products the same way you were when I met you back in like 2015.
right.
And
That's a
here we
long
are, like
time.
9 years later. It's crazy. So before we get into all of that, I would just love to hear some of your story. I'm starting every podcast episode off just saying like, who is the woman, Gina? Um, there's so many amazing things that you do, which I'm super excited to get into. But first, I want to know who is the woman, Gina?
Oh man, there's so many layers to that question. But I mean, I guess I can share. Um, hmm. I feel like like I said, I've always been just a creative person. I've always been a dreamer. Ever since I was little, I just had a huge imagination. And when I was young, I used to sing this song called Think Big. And it was just like people always said, oh, that's your song. Like, that's you. Like, that's who you are to a T. Because I was always someone who had grand ideas and just anything I thought I could put my mind to, I thought I could do. And that's my parents encouraged me in that way. But and I come out of a really big family. So I'm the middle child of seven. So I have four sisters and two brothers. So like we grew up in just a really big family. Um, and anytime we would find ourselves kind of in a situation where we didn't have what we needed or we wanted to dream up something new, we created. And so all of my
Wow.
siblings are super creative and we just come up with our own ideas and come up with ways to make things happen. And my parents really encouraged us to do that. And so I think it started at such a young age, this idea that I could go and be and do whatever I put my mind to. My dad was a minister and he's an assistant pastor now. So I kind of grew up in the church.
Mm.
And, you know, for most of my life, you know, I grew up learning about Jesus. I grew up believing in God, but also when I was 18, I kind of came to a point where I was getting to the point where I was going to be moving out of my parents' house and going to college. And I didn't really feel like I had a faith that was mine.
Mm.
And so I started really questioning some things and wondering. I had seen over the years people that had said they believed God, but their lives didn't reflect it. I had seen people that were like die hard. You know, I had seen people that weren't. And so I had just wanted to know God for myself. I never felt like I had a personal relationship with Him.
Mm.
I felt like for the good portion of the beginning years of my life, like my parents really believed, and I wanted to believe. You know, I wanted
Yeah.
to know Him for myself. And so, from the ages of 18 to 25, so for about 7 years, I decided I'm like I want to know God myself, and I had stopped. I went to college. I stopped like attending church, and I started just wondering like who He is, and I wanted to know Him personally, but I wasn't necessarily seeking Him. I was just like, I'll just live my life, and if God wants to show up and be real for me, then I will, take Him when He does that, And so it was through that time, I would say that I definitely saw a lot of things that God was like still protecting me and loving me
Mm.
through that time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until I was about 25 that I had a moment where the Lord spoke to me. And it was the first time I ever experienced His voice and I knew with everything in me that it was God. And the words that He spoke to me, and this was right in the middle of like my mess. So at the time, I had graduated college. I was living with my boyfriend at the time, which is my husband now. But I was partying with my friends. I wasn't worried about the Lord, like living for the Lord. I
Right,
wasn't
right.
that. I had a good job. Everything in my life looked as though it could be good and that it was good. I really had no complaints, but there was something that was still missing. And when I would go and visit church and stuff, I knew that, like, my heart knew that there was more for me there, but like, I just wasn't ready for that. But the Lord spoke to me one night, and
Mm.
I always remember it. Um, and He said to me, like what came to me was like in my heart and my mind. I woke up in the middle of the night and these words were said. He said, why are you asking everyone else where to go, who to be, and what to do besides the one who created you?
Mm.
And those words, like, just all of a sudden, I literally felt like blinds came off of my eyes, and I was like, this is God speaking to me. It was the craziest thing. I
Wow.
could not ever explain it to people. I always tell people
I
like,
love
I know
that.
with every bit inside of me. And the next day, like from that moment, I was like, I was changed. Something in me was like, I think that's like God actually spoke to me.
Mm.
And I like from there I started to seek to know Him. But I was like, I don't want Him like religiously. I don't want him
Yeah.
in any way that, like, I want something new. I want something different. And
Right,
so
right.
um, I had went back to start attending at my parents' church at the time, and or my uncle's church, and my dad's an assistant pastor there. And um, I started to just like want to know him. And I was like, I would wake up in the morning and I'd be like, okay, like what's on the agenda today? Like I want to know who you are. And I started to seek him for myself, and my entire life started to change. And so
Mm.
that year, um, or within the next couple years, I had got married. Well, I think that year I got married to my husband, and then we got pregnant with my daughter. And then the next year, that after I had her, the Lord started speaking to me and asking me, or telling me, like, there's a lot of things that are within you,
Mm.
um, and I want you to start to like use them. And so I'd always been creative. I went to school for marketing. So I had a job in marketing, and I worked in merchandising. I worked in buying. I had done all these things, but he would just start speaking to me. And at the time, I had a blog. So I started a blog. It was just like a fashion blog. It was
Oh,
called
cute.
I know. It was called I'm Perfectly Human. And I would just share like outfits I was wearing and like things I was, just my life. It was like a lifestyle blog. And as I started to really go deeper in my relationship and really start to get to know God, I felt like he was showing me that there was a lot within me that he had put within me that I didn't know was there.
Mm.
And so I started to draw. And I had drawn for like, I mean, I always drew. I was a doodler. So like I would draw in notebooks, and I was on the phone with somebody, I would be drawing, but I didn't think anything of it. I thought everybody did that. I didn't think it
I
was like
love that.
a big thing. And as he started showing me, like, no, this is a gift. Like you need to use it. I began to share my art on my blog, and it felt like a turn in my blog because I started talking about faith more, and I started talking about my art more. And one day the name Spoonful of Faith came to me, and I was
Mm.
like, that is, and it reminded me. So when I was little, my my dad would buy these like Disney sing-alongs.
How cute.
And it
I
would have
love your
like all
dad
the
already.
yes, yes, it would have like all the songs from like the Disney movies, and you could just sing the songs. And Mary Poppins song, A Spoonful of Sugar, like we would sing,
Aw.
sugar makes the medicine go down. But this spoonful of faith came to me, and I said, wow, it's a spoonful of faith. It's like a little bit of faith. It's like medicine, helps things go down.
I love that.
And I like I told my mom and my sister, and they were like, that's so cute. Like you should use that. And so I decided to start a blog called Spoonful of Faith. And in it, I would share like my life, my faith journey, because it was like God was teaching me all these new things about just following him
Yeah.
and knowing him, and then also my illustrations. And so from there, I began sharing my illustrations. I opened an Instagram account. And as I shared my work, people were like, this is good. And why aren't you doing this? Like this is
Yeah.
something here. And I started getting asked to illustrate for people, and um, it just began to like snowball into this other thing that I never knew it would be. And so um, it's just a testament to the Lord that, like, I don't know, it's crazy because I know my story was supposed to be the way that it was. Even though I grew up in the church, it it took 7 years of being away
Hmm.
to for God to speak to me
Yeah.
so that it would be real. And so
Yeah.
that, like, so my heart really is about being real and truly knowing the Lord, and then allowing our gifts and things that he gives us to not sit on a shelf, but to be used.
Yeah. I love
because gifts
that.
are meant to be used. They're meant to be
Yeah.
open. They're meant to be used. And if
Mm,
someone gives you a gift and you just sit it down somewhere, you never know what could come from it. And so
mm,
um, that's just a piece of my story, but um, it's just been amazing to see like all that the Lord has done over the course of Spoonful of Faith. And I've just always just tried to share bits and pieces of encouragement and like my story and hope for people because that's what it's all about. So,
mm. Oh,
yeah.
I love that so much. I was like really thinking about how good God is and how kind he is to like speak to you in a way that would connect with you because he said the one who created you. And as a
Yeah.
creator, you understand how precious to you what you created is. And so
Yes.
immediately I'm like, oh, God is so kind that he would speak to
Mm-hmm.
you in a way that would connect to you. Because one thing I really, all of your products that you release, you can just see you in them. Like, you know that they have a creator. You know that it's not just
Mm-hmm.
like something you put together for money. It is like this is your heart into the created thing. And it's the same with God, right? It's like he
Yes.
invests his heart into us. And like you said, if somebody buys you a gift and you put it on the shelf, it's almost like they have wasted their investment, you know? And
Yes.
so I love that your life is literally like a good return on investment for the Lord because we are all really like so blessed to just really watch your journey, but also participate because every time I put something on of yours or drink out of one of your mugs, I think about you and I think about how
Yeah.
inspiring you are. And so I really love that. Okay, so a spoonful of faith is really just I feel like it's a community. Like it's not even just a shop, it's not even just a page, but it's like a community. And I remember when I probably had just had my third, and you started this hashtag motherhood is sanctifying.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, that was like a godsend. Like I want to always give flowers where flowers are due to be given. And so I want to give you your flowers because that was the hardest season of my life
Mm.
as like a young I had brought my third child home from the hospital and my oldest wasn't even 3 yet. Like
Oh, yeah.
it was intense. I had an emergency C-section. I literally almost died in labor. My baby almost died in labor. Like
That.
it was chaos, right? And I'm home, I'm breastfeeding. I'm so far away from my family. My husband has to go back to work like 2 days after we get out of the hospital. And it was treacherous. Okay, it was a treacherous time. And some months later, I'm scrolling through Instagram and I had just started getting into like building an Instagram community, but you were my OG, right? My OG
Right.
IG bestie. And
Right.
so I was always checking for your stuff. And you started this motherhood is sanctifying hashtag. And you went on to talk about like the journey of motherhood and how it is like a piece of our sanctification journey. It literally changed my perspective on that season of my
Mhm.
life because
Mhm.
what, not me about to get emotional, but what it was challenging me with is we know that the process of sanctification is a journey of becoming something. And it was
Mm.
helping me to like see all of the challenges of that treacherous season of my life as a part of my becoming journey. And so I would love to hear a little bit of the origin of that for you, of like not only the motherhood is sanctifying, but how you found it in yourself to use your platform not just as a way to earn income like through your products, but as a way to really spur women on.
Yeah, yeah. And oh gosh. So I have to give flowers because motherhood is sanctifying. I heard it first by Ruth Chu Simons. She
Yes.
had mentioned it on her page. I think she was talking about something. And I was like, I want to turn that into a hashtag because
Mm.
it was so like it just made it felt the way that you felt when you see it, when you saw it and
Yeah,
read it for the
yeah.
first time. And so I wrote her and I and her team and I was like, I want to use this hashtag, but I if you are using it, like I don't want to step on any toes. But I and they were like, go for it.
And she has six
So
boys, so that's a lot
yes.
of sanctification, baby. So we
Yes.
live in Albuquerque together, so I have the privilege of being around her a lot.
Oh
She is
yeah.
genuinely so patient and kind, and
Oh
I'd be like, "How
wow.
do you go home to six boys and come out the house this gracious?"
Right. Right.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So that yeah, I And so I had reached out to them and they were like, go for it. And so I began to, because my kids were really young at that time too. If you, okay, you said that you had just come home and your oldest was 3. So yeah,
Yep.
my kids were 1 and 3.
Yep.
And it was a time where I was like in the throes of, like you're in the
Like
throes
this
of
is
raising
ghetto.
kids. Yes, like you got kids hanging from you, like you're
Yeah.
trying to do the right thing. You're trying to raise them. You're all, you're trying to spend time with the Lord. And I remember it being like so difficult. And the Lord really started just changing my heart about that season,
Mm-hmm.
like he did with you, and just showing me that there's a lot of things that you're growing through in here, like you're not gonna get these moments back with your kids. Like there's a
Mm.
lot of different things that I was not necessarily taking for granted, but I was like just trying to get out of the season. And he's like, this is where
Yeah.
you are. Like you are
Rest here,
here.
my child.
Yes, like sit down and be present. And so I think that was really what it was showing me, was that when I started being intentional and present in those seasons and realizing that through this process, like we were growing it together,
Mm. Yeah.
it started to really open up things. And so I started to send the t-shirt to people. I think I sent did I send you the
Uh-huh.
t-shirt? Like, I
Uh-huh.
know I sent you a t-shirt. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I started sending the t-shirt to like some of my Instagram friends and asking them to just share like what that hashtag meant to them. And it was beautiful because it was a way to connect, bless you,
Thank you.
with community, and also um, to just, yeah, like you said, just build a community to encourage each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was just, it's so cool because there's just been different moments through the years it's been full of
Yeah.
things, been able to like do those things where we come together and encourage one another. And that's
Yeah.
what I love about it. And that's actually the heart of where, and the trajectory of where we're going next. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. I remember I would literally click the hashtag and be like,
Yes.
let me see how other mamas are trekking through because this is so hard. And that age is so hard,
Yes.
especially when there's multiple of them. Y'all, brain cells is just not existent because what are you even doing? Like it was so hard. And so I love that. And I still use that hashtag on every motherhood post that I make
Yeah.
all
Oh,
these years later.
good.
Now, I wore that shirt until it turned brown, so I don't have it no more. But I love that
It
so
was
much.
white.
It was a white shirt. I'm
But
like,
didn't
okay,
last
it's time to let
long.
this go. No, I love that so much. Okay, so you're you have now turned all of those little lessons and little moments into these products, really. Um, I see like a lot of the times when I'm
Yeah.
looking at some of your products, it's really a story. There's a story in them, like the Motherhood is Sanctifying tea. Um, the first mug I
I got
got
to
from
bring that
you.
back. I'm sorry. I got to bring
You
that back.
have to bring it back
I'm
for
like, hold
Mother's
on,
Day.
dude. I got to bring that back. Yeah.
Hey sis, yes, you exclusive. A spoonful of faith is
Right.
releasing the Motherhood is Sanctifying tea this Mother's Day. Not me giving you a date.
I know. Hold up, though. That is
That's
that
a
is
good
something.
idea. I'm
Hey.
just saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it so much. And it is like there was a story in that. I would wear that shirt and then I would go to like a women's Bible study or go to the grocery store and it would be always a conversation starter. Same
Yeah.
thing with the mugs that I get from you. Like women come over, like I do a lot of like mentorship, discipleship, and I'll be intentional to give them one of your mugs because you're a coffee drinker, you be like, okay, like
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
mug make you feel some type of way.
Yeah.
And they would always ask about it, and I'd always be able to share more of like the story of a spoonful of faith. And so as you started, actually I want to hear a little bit about how you even got into like products and
Yeah.
entrepreneurship because I know that in my realm of Instagram, most people are like in the business world or wanting to be. So I would love to hear a little bit about that. But also like I do feel like it is bold to take personal parts of your story and turn it into products and create a whole shop off of it because that's vulnerable. You know what I mean? There's like a
Mhm.
certain depth of vulnerability to like not just try to sell what is trendy, but try to sell what has meaning because it meant something to you. So
Yeah.
how did you like hone in on those things, turn them into these products, and then I mean now like you're in my eyes like the goat of these like you've been in Target. I was in Target one day. I saw my sister's stuff on the shelf. I cried. Okay. I was like, literally took pictures with it,
Right.
everything. I'm checking out. I'm like, this my friend. Like she did that. Like
Right.
and so it has obviously the Lord has blessed it. And so yeah, coming into like shifting Spoonful of Faith from just like a IG platform and a blog to like this entity that it is now, what was that journey like for you? And how vulnerable was that to like put yourself out there in that way?
Yeah, no, I will say that it wasn't as difficult as it felt at the time because it seemed like like I came onto the scene and there was a lot of mommy bloggers. There was a lot of
Yeah.
women that were starting to share like their lives. And so I felt like as I shared, my experiences, there was so much support. There were so many that were like, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, yes, I
Yeah.
need to hear this.
Yeah.
So the transition to, began to put it on product, and that felt like an easy transition because I felt like I had so many people behind me supporting me and telling me to go for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say though, like I had felt like I was creating artwork and it just felt so different than what everyone else was
Mm.
doing. And I
Yeah, it
remember like
was.
being like feeling like, I could create whatever I wanted to create, but also wondering if people would relate and connect to the things I was creating. And as I was sharing them, people were connecting to them. And
Mm.
I had opened an Etsy shop where I was just selling like my art prints at the time. And I remember at some points I wasn't even selling them. I was making them and I was giving them to friends. Like if someone had written
Mm.
me and was like, "Oh, this really like spoke to me and this is exactly what I needed," I'd be like, "Do you want it?" And they'd be like, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah, do you want it?"
Aw.
Like because I'm like it must have been for you, and so I had
Oh, I love
really
that.
started to share it in that way, where
Yeah.
like a lot of the original pieces of things that I had created years ago I don't have because I started gifting them to people.
Yeah.
And I remember it really being ideas from the community of people that
Mm.
had been following me that were like, "Can you put this on a notebook? Can you like I want to keep this with me every day."
Oh, I love
And
that.
as I started to hear that, as I looked into the market of what was there, I just felt like there was a gap. There was something missing. Um, and the stuff that I created was very different. And a lot of people weren't like drawing words and quotes over their artwork. It was like not really,
Yeah.
lettering
Yeah.
was like its own art form, and
Yeah.
illustration was its own art form, and there was this mesh that I was creating in between that. It just felt so different, and I began to kind of dream up like products, and I was like, I want to make products. I always wanted to have products in stores. I always wanted to like see my artwork on like fabrics and I had like always been a big dreamer. Like I said, I had big dreams for like where it could go, but I didn't know how to do that. I was like, I don't
Hmm.
know how that people do that. I don't know where to start. And
Yeah.
so um I was like, I'm just gonna start by having my own job. Like I'm just gonna make all the things
Period.
I want to see in the world.
I love that.
I
I
didn't
love
know
that.
where to begin. I didn't know how I was gonna do it. I didn't um I didn't know where to get the products. I didn't know. I was still drawing everything by hand. I wasn't doing a lot of digital work at that time, and so
Hmm.
I didn't know how I was going to get it onto the computer, like everything. And so I began like really the DIYer in me, the creative in me from when I was young, you know,
Mm.
sparked up again, like the things that I didn't realize God had taught me when I was the kid to use my resources and use what I had to, ask questions to figure it out. That started to really bubble in me, and I began to
Mm.
just start to create products that I wanted to see in the world. I used like print on demand services. I would get like things printed from Vista Print at first, like just to see if I liked it.
Yeah.
And I would sell it, and that was truly where it began. And obviously over the years, I learned a lot. I gained a lot of experience. I got, access to more resources, more people that would help me and mentor me in that. And it grew into something much greater. But that's
Mm.
really where it began.
I
Yeah.
love that. That's that again, like God is so kind because he wastes nothing. Like you said, you grew up in this big family, one of seven, which I'm with you, same, same, okay. And you had to be resourceful and you had to get creative, and he used that, like applied that to, like it was a part of his plan for you all along. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? To like
Yeah.
dive into those parts of you. I love that so much. Also, like middle of seven, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, let me hone back in on that because one thing I always like get this like strong sense of like confidence from you. Like you just seem so confident and so certain. So like, do you not have middle child syndrome?
That's what everybody, yeah, no, I don't. Everybody says that. It's funny because one of my older sisters is like, I'm the middle child, but she is the middle girl.
Okay, okay, okay,
She
okay, okay.
feels
Because
like
I'm like,
yeah, she feels like she
uh-huh.
gets the middle child, and I don't feel like that, but I have always been. It's so interesting because we're all like 2 to 3 years apart too, so like we are
Oh,
consistently
yep,
like
yep, same,
But
same.
yeah, I know everyone's always like, "You're the middle child."
Right, like what? I
I don't
know.
get it.
Seriously.
It makes
I love
sense.
that. Where do you think that boldness and that confidence comes from? Because it is not only just like showing itself through your entrepreneurship, but really just who you are, like in conversation with you, your presence. Like I would watch your YouTube videos and just like you're such a confident speaker, you share vulnerably, which sharing vulnerably has to come with some confidence, you
Yeah,
know? Also like even you turning 18 and moving out of your parents' house, be like, I'm gonna do my own thing. That's bold. Like there's some
that's true.
confidence in that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So where does that confidence come from for
Oh
you?
man, I'm like, wow. Well, I will say that the family I come from is very bold and confident. Like
Okay, I love it.
especially like my dad's side of the family, they are all like in your face, loud, confident. Like, and he has a lot of sisters too, so they're like all like
Okay,
very
okay.
confident women. And then my mom really like affirmed me and my siblings growing up. Like we grew up in
Mm,
predominant, like we came from like grew up in the city where
hmm.
I'm sorry, my parents moved here to Minnesota from Illinois when I was like 4 or 5.
Okay.
And so they were in their what early 30s or mid 30s, and they left everything they knew to come to Minnesota to because my dad's sister had found like this pastor and this church, and she had changed her life and given her life to Christ, and they like were like, okay, we're gonna come. And so
Mm.
they left everything they knew and like rebuilt their life here. And um like we just like were in the city at first. When we first moved here, we lived in a 1 bedroom apartment. First, we lived with my aunt in a 1 bedroom apartment. Then we
Wow.
moved across the hall in a 1 bedroom apartment. At that time, I think there was 4 or 5 of us kids.
Wow.
Yeah, and so from there, my parents moved into a townhome that had like 2 or 3 bedrooms that we all shared, and then they finally purchased their first home. And then when they did that, we moved out of the city into the suburbs, and it was like a new development area. It was predominantly white, and so we lived in that house for about 15 years. So we were pretty much the only black people on the block. Like I grew up,
Wow.
so my mom and dad like affirmed us. Like we went to a all black church that was in the city,
Wow.
but we lived like my Monday through Friday was pretty much being the only black girl in most situations, being one of few in my entire school until I got to middle school, which was a lot more schools came into that area. So um my mom had the job of making sure that we knew who we were,
Hmm.
who God made us to be, that we were
Mm.
beautiful with like what we had, that like she would always tell us it doesn't matter, your skin color, like every shade that God has made, I love it,
Oh,
and she would
I love her.
always affirm us. So like I grew up in this, they pretty much like prepared us before we went out. Um, and so I think that's where a lot of the affirming words and things come through in my work
Mm,
because that's what I heard, that's what I know. And I
mm.
remember meeting people, friends that had never heard these things from their parents, had never felt these things,
Yeah.
and never been told these things. And I was told them constantly. I think a
Mm.
lot of my boldness comes from that. Yeah.
I love that. And that's why I love asking these like random questions about childhood or upbringing because it all just really webs together in this like beautiful like spider web of your story. Because I'm like, okay, it makes sense. You stepped into social media and you stepped into digital products in a way that you had not yet done seen before. You
Mm-hmm.
started doing things like you said, script over your artwork, things that now could are very trendy, but back when we were like earlier in the Instagram days, it was
Yeah.
not all over the place like that. So now it makes sense because you were raised to take up space.
Yeah.
And that's what
Yeah.
you've done in this like entrepreneurship world, in this art world. And I'm so proud of you and I'm so proud of your parents. Like I want them on the podcast.
I
Okay.
know. I was like as we talked
Like,
about that, like as you said, raised to take up space, that like hit me because I'm like, that is
yeah.
exactly how they raise us,
Yeah.
not to be small, like to take up the space that we were given, to know
Mm.
who God created us to be confident in who we are. Um,
Kudos to them. That is
yeah,
such a beautiful thing. And we get to experience the fruit of their labor. Their
yeah.
intentionality in raising you that way has blessed us, like the masses. So I would like to take a moment to thank your parents
Oh,
for
thanks,
their
mom and
intentionality
dad.
because that's so good. I love that. Okay. Okay. So then you're in this space. Now you're in this entrepreneurship space. And like I said, I remember the first thing you sent out. It was like a motherhood is sanctifying tea and a mug. That was back in like
Yes.
2017. So like a long time ago. And here we are now. Okay, it's 2024, and my sis has done incredible things. I'm watching you paint murals. I'm seeing your product all over in stores, all of these things. Some of like my favorite influencers drinking out of your mugs or wearing your sweaters. Like it's been so beautiful to watch. I'm curious, when do you feel like that moment was where you had like your big break? Was it when you started to see all of those things happen for you, or were you kind of like already felt satisfied with what you were doing and then that just happened?
Yeah, I would say the latter because it's interesting. Like some of the most popular pieces of my work and things that did begin to get licensed and picked up by big retailers and stuff, were it was artwork that I'd already done
Yeah.
years before. So
Yeah.
I felt like I was finding my groove and my space of where I was supposed to be, but I was also not sure what I wanted to do. I was still like experimenting. And I feel like I'm always like experimenting and learning. And I never want to change that. I always want to be
Yeah.
I never want to be so sure about I gotta do it this way, I gotta do
Love
this, and I
that.
can only do that. I really want to continue to just open myself up. And so
Yeah.
it was interesting because I had come out with this collection and it was the one that has the Unity design, which is the one you're wearing right now.
Obsessed. Obsessed.
And then there were a few other designs, and I just like really loved that collection. I was like, I remember putting it out, and I didn't think like I drew that shirt, but I didn't think I liked it. But like I'm as a creative, you're like
Yeah,
questioning
yeah.
everything. You're like, I don't know, people are
Critical
gonna
and
like,
yeah.
yeah, like I
For
have no
sure.
clue. And when I used to drop things, and I should get back to this honestly. When I used to drop things, I would share them with people as
Mhm.
I was like, I'm like, okay, this is coming up. And here's like 20 designs. I would and I would always drop like 20 designs and everybody would be like,
Yeah.
"That's so much. I can't handle it. Like, I don't know what to
I know.
get."
I literally, every time I got an email that was like, what products would you like? I was like, oh Lord, it's
I
so many
know. Like
goodness.
I would drop like all these designs. And I still do. Like I can't
I
decide.
love it. I
You
love it. They're all so good. So yes, I get
know?
it.
And so many people like were drawn to that. They were like, "Oh my gosh, I want this. I need this. I need this." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Okay, like that's
Yeah.
interesting. I was not the one I thought you would like, but okay."
Yeah.
And it just so happened like within, I don't know, 6 months or so later, I was being asked by Target to come up with a collection for their Black History Month, and they,
Ooh!
I know, and they love like the same design. So they had told me like send over all this work, you know, and we're gonna make a calendar and all these things. And this was all work that I had done for years. So it was just really cool to see that like none of it was wasted. Like all the work, I mean, it had done what it was supposed to do when it was put out into the world in the
Yeah.
first place, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but the it piqued the interest of others, but I was already doing the work. And that's
Yeah.
that's the part that like is really important for me to like get across, is that it wasn't like I
Mm.
was, they found me and I was just in a corner work. You know what I mean? Like I was already sharing these things.
Yeah.
So I was already putting myself out there. Um, and it did feel like, so I think that year that I had released that, I'd actually been asked like the year before, I think it was 2019 or 2019, I had been asked by HarperCollins to do a children's book. So I was
Mm.
like, oh my gosh, like, is
Oh,
this
we
real?
love the
Like,
book. Yeah.
yeah, like, is this real? Like, I was so like, did they really send this to me? Like, I would question, like, are they sure? And I had, been doing other work and putting myself out there. And so my book had released, and then this collection had released. So all these things had, like, I didn't know at the time, but all these things had started to release around the same time. So it just felt like
Mm.
this big momentum, like boost and like shift.
Flowing milk and honey, baby.
And did not plan any of it. Like I didn't realize the
Right.
timelines were gonna align you know
Mm.
what I mean? God already knew what
Yeah.
was gonna
Yeah.
happen. And so it's so cool to think about, because it was
Mm.
nothing that I planned.
Mm. I love that. I'm like, there's so many things there. Like, I feel like we could make a whole nother episode about just that part of your story because the first thing that stood out to me is like you were doing what you were just supposed to be doing. And that was creating and that was sharing with the world. You were doing it for your cloud of witnesses. You weren't doing it for like waiting on this big break moment or feeling like what I'm doing isn't matter unless the masses see it, unless Target reaches out or unless Harper call. You weren't thinking about that. It reminds me of David in the field tending to his sheep when this
uh,
old man comes and is like, "You're going to be the next king of Israel." And he's just this little muddy. It said he was like ruddy and handsome, just small in stature, but he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. And as I'm like reading through this story of David, right? There's moments where he's called to something else, like his dad has him running back and forth to the field, but he keeps going back to his sheep. He
mm-hmm.
goes to fight Goliath and he has this huge break moment, but he keeps going back to his sheep. He's called to come work for Saul in the kingdom, like play him the harp, but he keeps going back to his sheep. And like God elevated him as he was doing what he was supposed to be doing. And I just love that, sis. That is so your story. As I'm hearing you, it's like you were doing it for me. You were doing it for all of us squirrels, okay, that are like, we need to just like be inspired or like this unity design that you did. Oh my gosh, I feel like when I think about my podcast, like the HSYS podcast, I think about this shirt. I think about this design. So you were doing it for your cloud of witnesses and you were spurring us on all the while. And then God brought that moment where you're anointed now and you have this, what we see is like this big break moment. The book is amazing. My boys absolutely
Thank
love it. It's still
you.
one of their favorites. They still pick it at least once a week for our nighttime read. So
Oh,
all that you're doing is just affecting so many people. But the most beautiful part to me of that story is you were just tending to the sheep. And
oh,
then God brought you the prophet to anoint you. And like, look at all of us watching you like elevated, and you never left us behind. You're still doing the same thing. And I just love that. So one, thank you for your faithfulness because it is truly like a testament of God is going to meet you where you're at. You don't have to go seeking, you don't have to go begging. Like we are children of God, we are not beggars. You're not like, "Oh, I was emailing Target every single day and I was trying to go on LinkedIn and find all of their people who work for them and I was just
right.
begging them to give me this opportunity." Like, no, you are a daughter of a king. You're not a beggar. And
Yes.
your father gifted you. And so I just love that
Oh,
so much. I
that's
love that so much.
that's so good. I'm like, as you were talking, I'm like tearing up, because I'm like, that is so. it's just so true that I just I want to stay that way. I think over the past couple of years, so many things have elevated my work to a point where I'm like, okay, well, what's next, right? And
Yeah.
the Lord has been working on my heart to be like, go back, right? Like go
Mm.
back to the sheep, go back,
Mm.
go back to
Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And he will work it out just like he's always worked it out,
Absolutely.
and so
Absolutely.
thank you for saying that, because that's
Yeah.
exactly what I needed to hear today.
No, that's so good. And it like leads me to my next thought is like, so all those wonderful things happened and was it like that was it? Like you just took off from there? Everything has just been wonderful since then? Or has there been moments where it's like, okay, wait, like that happened and then dot dot dot. Like
Yeah.
has it been just like a propelling ever since? Or has there been high highs, low lows? Has there been still been like wilderness moments and then some moments of land of flowing with milk and honey, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's been a roller coaster. I will say it has
Yeah.
been ups and downs. A lot of the great things were happening, right before the pandemic. And then there
hmm
was like this influx of work and eyes because of,
Yeah.
things that happened in 2020, 2021.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
Oh, right there too. You're in Minnesota.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Right here in our,
Yeah.
home state. So, um, it felt like a lot.
Yeah.
And, for a moment, I was like, okay, I have to hire people and I have to, do all these
Mhm.
things. And I started getting in, so deep in it that I was like, what I had to kind of like, God had to kind of pull me out and be like, what is all this for? Like, why?
Mm. Yeah.
Get me back to the why of it all. And so I think there was a lot of great high moments, but then there was a lot of seeking and wondering, because I always want, I've always said that I want what God has for me.
Yeah.
I don't
Absolutely.
care if it's not what people think I should be doing. I
That's
don't
good.
care if people think it's dumb, whatever, or foolish, because I know it's not foolish. If the Lord tells me to
Yeah.
go for it and
Yeah.
tells me to do it, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And so, for the past few years, I felt like I was putting out work and creating art and stuff, but God was telling me like I wasn't sharing as much of my story like I was
Mm.
in the past.
Yeah.
I know that it was purposeful because I believe he was doing a lot of work in my heart.
Mm.
And I was still in a lot of things that I felt like if I was talking and sharing in that space, probably wouldn't have been good for other people. I was bleeding out on people while I was going through my own stuff. And it was really a reckoning, understanding, and not, I will say, like, it's not deconstructing, but like reconstructing my faith and like
Right.
really understanding and knowing the Lord for myself.
Yeah.
So through that, now I'm starting to work on, more building these community elements. And for the past 3 years, he's been telling me that he wanted me to start a nonprofit. And I've just been like, but where,
Mm.
when, how? I have all of these things I
Right.
need to do now because you brought me all these things. And now,
Yeah.
and so, um, now I'm like, okay, like we have to change and go where the Lord's telling me to go. Like I have to
Mm.
get back to the work that he had given me and not get
Mhm.
focused in all these other things. And so
Mm.
it's been ups and it's been downs. It's been good. But I
Mhm.
think like one thing that has always consistently been true from the beginning of Spoonful of Faith till now is that God always brings me what I need. And so
Mm.
um as it comes to clients, projects, anything, anytime I'm like feeling like without lack, I have to just keep walking and continue trusting him, because
Mm.
there's always something that comes through. And often it'll be through word of mouth, which is even more like cool and powerful and stuff, because
Yeah.
it's just like the Lord just put you on somebody's heart to get to
Yes.
you. And so most of my work and a lot of things that have happened to me have been because someone said my name in a
Mm.
room that I wasn't in. And
Mm.
God has always told me that I don't need to be connected because he is already well connected to everybody.
Mm.
He has access to everyone.
Amen.
I don't need
Amen.
any connections. He's the connection.
Mm.
And so I've just always believed and trusted in that. And so
Mm.
like no matter if it looks like I'm high or it looks like I'm low, like I know God's got me. And so
Mm.
that's, really what it's been over these past
Mm.
4 or 5 years.
That's so good. Like, ooh, Lord, may you put my name on the lips of the right person at the right time because that is so
Yes.
good. And because it's word of mouth, like it's more credible, it's more
Yes.
like personal. And so I really love that. So like in those moments, because you don't stop creating, like you keep going, you keep like and you have this video on YouTube that was really good for me because you talked about like getting yourself out of kind of like this creative rut. And you talked
Mm-hmm.
about like just creating to create, not for
Right.
profit, not to create a product, but just creating to create. So like what keeps you creating in the
Mm.
moments that are low, in the moments that seem dark? What keeps you creating?
Man, this is good. Because there is something specifically that I have a book coming out, and I talk about
Ooh!
one of these things in it. It's a book for women, and it's about my story. And but one of the things that keeps me, and that he even spoke to me this past week, was these words: do it as worship.
Mm.
Years ago, when
Ooh.
I was in the middle of like the thick of motherhood, trying to do these things, people kept asking me, "How are you doing this? Like, how when you find time, when you sleep, like
Wow.
all of these things."
Wow.
And I remember it feeling heavy again. Like, I knew when God's grace and anointing was on me, it didn't feel heavy. I was like, "Hey,
Right, right,
I'm doing what I gotta do, right?"
right.
But when it started to feel like I was churning, churning through
Mm.
something, I'm like, hold up, this ain't right.
Yeah.
And I remember the Lord telling me, like, do it as worship. I need you
Wow.
to create and live, like, it didn't just live your life. Everything you
Mm.
do it as an act of worship to me. So when you start to do it as worship, you just start to show up. You don't know what's going to
Mm.
be created. You
Yeah.
don't know what you're going to do, but you're just going to be here with me and worship,
That's
and we're
good.
just going to create and see what
That's
comes of
good.
it. Maybe you'll sit here. Maybe we won't create
Mm.
anything today. Maybe we'll just talk. Maybe we'll
Mm.
sing. Maybe you'll cry. Maybe we'll laugh together.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we'll make a masterpiece. And so I
Right.
started to just show up to my quiet time with the Lord. I would have my paints and stuff ready. I would have my journal ready, and I would just be like in worship to Him. And as I
Mm.
began to start that practice, it changed everything for me because
Gosh, that's so good,
burden,
Gina.
it took the
Yeah.
burden off of me to
Mm.
have to produce, to have to make something that was perfect, to have to
Mm.
and it put it on Him. It started putting it on Him, like, well, Lord, if you don't
Mm.
do it, if
Yep.
you don't create this thing while we're together, then it ain't supposed to be made today. And so I
Mm.
stopped focusing so heavy on like it being me. Like, if this is yours, then this is yours. Like, then you
Mm.
have to give it. You have to show me. And so as I began to just keep that sentiment in my mind of doing it as worship, and
Mm.
like putting my feet on the ground, breathing in, being present with Him, and allowing Him to work through me. And in those times of creativity, it became easy. And so,
Mm.
um, anytime I find myself in those places where I am stuck, I know I have to get or feel stuck, right? Like, I know I have to get back in His presence. I know I have to spend time with Him.
Mm.
I know I have to start remembering that my life, everything I do in my life is worship to Him. If I can honor Him in every moment of my life, like everything would be all right. Like,
Mm.
God doesn't need, I just heard this other day, actually, I was listening to a podcast by Jess Connolly, and she
Mm.
was saying, God doesn't need anything from us. So
Right.
sometimes we put this burden and pressure on us that,
Yeah.
like, He needs me to do this.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
He's inviting us into an opportunity to do something with Him, because He
Mm.
doesn't need us. He says He'll
Yep.
have nature cry out, He'll have rocks cry
Yep.
out. He
Literally.
doesn't
Yep.
need us to do any of these things.
Yep.
This is an opportunity for us to be in community together, for us to glorify Him, for us to worship Him. And so, if it
Mm.
doesn't come the way we want it to come in that moment, then that's okay. Like, we need to let go of this burden of thinking we need to produce and to,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
to make and do all of these things for God, because He doesn't need us. He just wants us. He just wants us. And so,
Yep.
um, that really, really changed like a lot of things for me. And when I started, so now as I start, like, when I create collections, when I sit down, to make artwork, I'm like, I just be like, okay, what we about to do, Lord?
I love that.
If he
I
doesn't
love
bring
that.
it, then it wasn't for like it wasn't supposed to be today. Let's just spend time together.
Mm,
Let me just use this time of worship to glorify you, to
mm,
to use the gifts you've given me,
yeah.
and that's what I do. That's how I
Mm,
keep showing up. Is him, it's him.
yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so good. Do it as worship. I love that so much because we know that worship is an offering. And oftentimes, when we as creators or as entrepreneurs, when we're going to create, we're doing it honestly as something that we're hoping gives us a reward, right?
Yes.
Whereas doing it as worship puts you in this position to, like, this is my offering. And because
Mm-hmm.
you're offering that to the Lord, He's offering it back to us, your consumers. And it is like this beautiful partnership you have with Him. And again, I am reminded of David because that was the cry of his heart. He was a worshiper. You know what
Yep.
I mean? And
Yep.
I think when you were like talking about going and just doing it like as worship, even when you don't know like what else to give to the Lord, it reminds me of when the scripture says that David was undignified in his worship, like
Mm.
he was in his chonies basically, and he was worshiping the Lord.
Right.
Like I'll become even more undignified than this. I think about that, and so let me find out your name is Davida, because you reminded me of David, friend. You reminded me of David, friend. I'm like, hold up, I'm finna change your name on my phone to Davida.
Right.
I love
Yes.
that
Oh my
so
gosh. Yes.
much.
That's what I always loved. I always loved about David's story and his heart. Because so many people from the
Yeah.
outside could look at him and call him this and that.
Yep.
But he
Yep.
knew God, like he
Yep.
knew, and
Yep.
he loved him. And
Yep.
when he was wrong or did wrong or found himself in situations, he would just cry out, like,
You
"Look,
just
Lord,
cry
I
out.
love
Yep.
you. Like I need you.
Yep.
Protect me from these people.
Yep.
I did wrong. You know
Absolutely.
I did wrong.
I know.
But you love me.
Yes.
That was just like to me the honesty is what I
Hmm.
love about his story.
Yeah. And that sounds like yours. It
Yeah.
sounds like yours. It sounds like your story. I love that, sis. I actually really like want people to hone in on that because I think oftentimes we look at a woman and we see her success or we see who, like what she does, we see what she produces, and we categorize that as the sum of who she is. Like, oh, Gina, the successful artist. Like, no, Gina, the woman after God's own heart. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I want people to hear in your story because that's what they said about David. The only person in the scriptures said to be a man after God's own heart. When people look at you, I don't want them to just see you as, oh, the one who's in Target, oh, the one with the book deals. Like, no, but Gina, a woman after God's own heart. And
Oh,
look at how God is like he left David a legacy. He promised David that like through his lineage would come the Messiah. And
mhm.
here we are, like now we get to watch your legacy unfold as you continue to be a woman after God's own heart. And as your acts of
Ooh,
worships for him become offerings to us. Like look at God. Sis, I'm just so grateful that you choose to worship him because we all get to be the benefactors of your worship. So thank you. Thank you so
oh
much.
man, thank you. I'm trying to hold back my tears
No, I
because Holy
love
Spirit
it.
just be talking through you. I'm like, oh my God, he is such an encourager. Wow, thank
Oh,
you.
well, thank you, sis. Like I've just loved this conversation. But before we wrap it up, I would love two things. One, I want to hear what we can be looking for. Of course, I'm gonna plug all your things in the show notes, right? Your books, your
Right.
website, all of that. But what is coming up that we can keep an eye out on so that we can participate in what the Lord is doing with you?
Yeah, so actually this fall in August I have two books coming out. So
Ah,
I know I have like my first full length book, which is like I said, a book for women that'll have artwork and different things in
aw,
it. And it shares my
yay.
story. It's called Sacred Creativity.
Ooh,
Yes.
okay. I love that.
Yeah, so you check that out. That is actually on pre-order now. So if you look it up,
Oh,
you'll be
yay. Okay, okay.
and then I'm also coming out with a coloring book at that time as well, and it's called Wildly Love. And
Oh, I
so
love that.
that will be both of those will be coming out in August. And then, like I said, I'm working on some new things. So I am in the process of building more community
Mm,
aspects to Spoonful of Faith, more resources to help women to use their gifts and just resource and equip them and support them in that way.
I love
um,
that.
with mentoring and coaching, and then just resources. But I want to be able to really help women and children connect with creativity, because a lot of times when we grow from our youth, people start telling us to put away these things,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
shouldn't be, let's focus more on this and that. And so I want to be able to offer workshops and classes and resources, but I also want to be able to do that in a way that people can afford it, that it's accessible, that it's low or no cost. And so I'm working on building a nonprofit where I can do that.
Oh,
So that is a new journey. And so I will be sharing more of all of that, coming down the pipeline. But for now, you can look forward to seeing the books in August.
oh,
And
I'm so excited. I'm like, okay, that sounds like perfect presents. And that's right before holiday season. So look at God
yeah.
on the timing. I'm so proud of you and super excited. I'll also put those links in the show notes if you're listening or on YouTube in the description box. So look out for that. And lastly, I would love if you could just share what is an encouragement that you would share to a woman who is really struggling to like feel purpose in her passion or in just moving forward in the things that God has put on her heart because maybe she doesn't see what the world deems as success from it. What is an encouragement that you would give for her to keep going even
Yeah.
still?
Yeah. So I would say something that helped me, especially in the beginning, it is based off of scripture, but it's do not despise small beginnings. And I
Mm,
and that is something that I come back to all the time,
yeah.
because there's so many different times where our chapters change and pages
Yep.
turn, seasons turn, and we're
Yep.
back to something new. And
Yeah.
or we're back to a place where things feel small, they feel not
Yeah.
important, they don't feel
Yeah.
like it's making any difference. And in this story, um, God says, "Don't despise small beginnings," and that He actually rejoices when the work begins. So it's like there
Mm.
is rejoice in
Ooh.
heaven. There is like victory, like it's victorious when you started it,
Mm.
and it's not even about you thinking it needs to become this big thing. Like God is
Mm.
like sitting on the sidelines, like, yes, like I'm so glad that you wrote in your journal today. I'm so glad that
Mm.
you posted that today. It didn't feel like much, but I
Yeah.
like am rejoicing in the beginning, in
Mm.
the seeing the start of the thing. And I think if there's anything I can encourage you in, it is to not overlook, because often the most important part of anything that's growing, if you ever grow anything, which I'm actually a black thumb, so I probably shouldn't be giving any advice on anything because everything I plant dies. But
I'm weak.
but the roots of the plant are the most important. And guess what? A lot of times
Mm.
when you plant things, that takes the longest time to
Gosh,
like
yeah.
you don't see a bud for a while.
Yep.
So when you, even though you think it doesn't mean anything, I can't see anything, it's not doing anything.
Mm.
Don't despise that, because the roots are the most important
Mm.
piece of the
Mm.
work anyway. That's going to
Yeah.
build the character, that's going to make things strong, that's where everything is growing from. So just stay
Mm.
faithful with it.
Mm.
Stay faithful
Oh,
with
that's good. I literally am just like I had this moment yesterday with my son. My youngest started like ripping all this stuff up. My oldest wants to like garden. He's really into like science, entomology, all those things.
it.
And my 2 year old, he's trifling. Okay. He starts pulling all these things up from like the garden bed. And he comes in, he has these things. And on the bottom of the, what looks to me just like a bunch of like greenery, there's all these big radishes. And I was like,
Mm,
what the heck? Like, look at Noah, look what you grew. And he
yeah.
was like, oh, wow, I forgot about those.
Ooh,
And he planted them months ago. And I told him, let this remind you that the seeds that you sow, even if you forget about them, God has not forgotten. And
yeah,
so
that's
keep
good.
like let's sow some more seed. Let's literally go out there and plant some more stuff and let's see what
That's
we
so
get to
good.
benefit this summer. That's literally what you're just reminding me of is like the seeds that we sow in faith, even if we
Yes.
forget about them, God will not forget. He will continue to
Yes.
tend to them. It is our duty to sow the seed. So, and we get to see that through all of the beautiful ways that God is allowing you to flourish and thrive. Sis, thank you for that gem of wisdom. Honestly, you're low key a preacher because you was dropping some gems today. Okay, it runs in the family or something because you were dropping some gems. Well, I would love to just finish off by, of course, thanking you for being here, but honestly, just thanking you for being a faithful sower. Like,
Mm,
Gina, you are such an incredible woman. You are such an example for so many of us on what it literally looks like to live your life with even just a spoonful of faith, and how God can take that spoonful of faith and he can create entities. Like, God can take that one stone and he can slay giants with it. You know,
yes.
God will take the girl that's worshiping as an art form, just like he did the young boy that was tending to the sheep, and create queens and kings. And your life is
Yes.
such a beautiful display of that. So thank you so much for being here, but thank you for living your life before us in in a manner worthy of the gospel. And your legacy, sis, is just going to be incredible. And I can just see it. Like, I can just see it. And I'm just grateful to be in your cloud of witnesses and be able to gauge from your journey what it looks like to be a faithful woman of God. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Seriously. Like this has
Thank-
been this conversation, this moment, this has just been so good to me. So,
Oh, I'm so glad. Look at God. I love you, sis. Thank you for
right?
being here.